Hello everyone, welcome once again to another series with PI with Mike. We'll be building a NestJS e-commerce API from zero to production. We'll be using Node.js. We'll be using MongoDB Atlas. Uh, most backend tutorials give you a working API. This series gives you a production grade backend, clean architecture, dependency injection, JWT security, which is JSON Web Token security, with two token types, refresh and access, which we'll be explaining. Rate limiting, input sanitization, and full test coverage. By the end of this series, you will have like an e-commerce API or a basic e-commerce API running on a real server, also containerized. NestJS is an opinionated node framework built on TypeScript. It has dependency injection built in. We do not need to wire a DI container, just like maybe when we use Python or Go or things like that. The modules, providers, and decorators are building blocks. Every feature we build will be a module. So we'll be having our, like I said, we'll be having our auth system, which uses two types of GWT tokens. We'll be having our user profiles. We'll be having create, read, update, delete operations for product. Or so, as some people call it, they call it insert, select, update, and delete. We would also have a cart system. We would have other status system. We would also implement some basic security practices such as rate limiting, input sanitization, and so on and so forth. We would also have testing setup, and we would then have like a deployment to cloud and also have it containerized. So a brief introduction into JWT. JWT, as it's called, is it is JSON Web Tokens, which is used in a lot of APIs for authentication, right? And these JSON Web Tokens, right? They are, how would I call it? They are short-lived tokens, or they are tokens used for authentication, like I said. And in this series, we'll be using two types: the access and the refresh. The access token is a short-lived JWT that the client uses to access protected resources such as APIs. It contains information called claims about the user, such as their ID or roles, and so on and so forth. It is sent with each API request, typically in the authorization header. So for example, a simple flow is when a user logs in, the server issues an access token, and then the client starts utilizing those tokens in request. When the request gets to the server verifies the token. If valid, it grants them access. If it's not, it denies them access for the operation that they want to carry out. We also have the refresh token, and those are like long-lived tokens that are used to obtain a new access token after the current one expires. In our instance, we would set our access token to expire after 15 minutes. Meanwhile, our refresh would expire after 7 days. So, and for refresh, they are not sent with every API request, unlike access. So they should be stored securely. For an example flow would be like when a user logs in, the server issues an access token, like let's say 15 minutes, and a refresh token in our case that expires within 7 days. So after 15 minutes, the access token expires. The client, which is your UI, which is your mobile app UI or your web app UI, the client sends the refresh token to the server validates the refresh token and issues a new access token. So why do we use both? if only a long-lived access token were used, anyone who stole it could access the user account for a long time. So which is why for short-lived access tokens, the exposure is limited. But for long-lived access token, user does not need to log in repeatedly. So, and like I said, we'll be having like a full test suite set up for like unit testing, which we'll be explaining, and end-to-end testing. In fact, let's even have a brief discussion about unit testing. So let's just, I would say, let's create a new window here. Mirror board. So one of the important things for these courses, you need to like have basic understanding of NestJS and programming. So things like functions, things like conditions, things like data types, things like variables, and so on and so forth. So let's create a new notebook. Save to my board. Let's say e-commerce API. Okay, so save. So for like, let's discuss about testing. Let's have a brief insight into testing. This is too small. Let's increase this. Okay, so let's assume that we have a function. Let's say in our API, let's get one rectangle. Let's say this is our entire API, right? And let's say we have like, no, this should be smaller. Let's say in our API, let's go back to our slide. Let's go back to our slide. Let's assume that we have user profile, a function for creating user profile. We have a function for fetching products, and we have a function for let's say we have a function for validation, for authentication rather. We have a function for user profile, and we have a function for the user to get products. So let's say we have this. Okay, let's label this as our API actually. API. So let's duplicate this. Let's duplicate this. Okay, so now let's say for a user, let's try to sketch a user. So let's say this is a user. So and this user wants to perform an operation. Let's say fetch products or fetch lists of products. Let's move this. So this user wants to perform an operation to fetch list of products. For example, let's say for this fetching list of products, let's say we have a function here to validate or authenticate. I have to reduce this now. This is too big. No, this is too small. So authenticates, and what does authenticate do? It does what? It verifies the claim in JWT token. Okay, so let's expand this. Okay, or validates the claim, anyone. So let's say this is the what? This is the JWT function. JWT function. So when when this function, when it validates the claim and says, okay, I can see this person's user ID, let's now check our database if this person is actually in our database. So let me duplicate this. So let's say this is user check function, or fetch user function, or validate user, date user function. And let's say this checks our database. Checks database if user exists. Let's move this. So, and let's say after we validate that, okay, let's get this. Arrow from here to here, arrow from here. Let's see, okay. Another arrow from here to here. So let's say if this claim is valid, right? Valid claim, go to the next step. If invalid, just return. So it checks if the user exists. If the user exists, it says okay, and the user is valid. It says okay. Let's proceed now to say user exists. Let's now call this our product function to fetch product function. This is, again, these are all intuition behind testing that I'm about to explain. Function to fetch products lists. Okay, so let's say this fetches the list of products, fetches list of products. So user, let's extend this. Okay, so when we talk about unit testing, that means we need to have several test cases for several edge cases. For JWT function, let's say we have, let's say I have, no, I don't want that. Let's say I duplicate this, then once more. Okay, so what then happens is in unit testing, I have to create several test cases to say test JWT function, test validate user, validate user, and then let's say also test fetch product list. So these are unit tests. Let me just get an arrow. These are unit tests. But when we talk about something like end-to-end testing, that means instead of testing this individually with several test cases, we then say we want to test this entire flow. Let me just get like another rectangle, but in this case now I need it to be bigger. I need this. So it would instead have like an entire suite that would test this, test entire fetch product list flow. So like this is like a basic intuition behind unit testing and integration testing. So let's go back to our VS Code. So you would need VS Code for this project, and if you don't have it, you can install it from like your Play Store. I mean your Apple Store, or any browser. So we can then say, okay, I've opened my own folder. So let's proceed to our terminal. You need to have nvm installed. If you use a MacBook, you can just run build install nvm, which is the Node version manager, but I have it installed, so I won't run that command. So we then do nvm install. We'll be using 2640. Yes, 2640. I think I already have it installed. It's already installed. Then we need to proceed to run a set of commands for our project's structure. So we are going to run node. So you can just run node-v to confirm you have node installed. You can run npm-v to ensure you have npm also installed. So we have to run a command for our e-commerce API. So we run npm-hi at NestJS for the CLI. Okay, I kind of missed like an argument. So npm-hi -g at NestJS /CLI. npm-hi -g at NestJS /CLI. Okay. So I think I'm having some issues with this command. Let's confirm that. You can use AI assistants to assist yourself. Okay, so let's instead use npm install. Then our next command would be nests. So this is just for us to like ensure we have NestJS CLI. So when this is done, we then have a new command. So we run nests new our e-commerce API. So we then choose our package manager. Let's proceed with npm. So it has started scaffolding our e-commerce API for us. So the beauty of this is that it would even instantiate like a Git repository for us, so that when this is done, we are going to see that our files in this instance are going to be all green, showing that a Git project was initialized, and those files, our new files rather, are not being tracked yet. So after we have this done, so while this is running, let's check our tsconfig.json. As you can see, we have emit decorators, experimental decorators also, yes, all set to true. That is for our NestJS decorators to work. So these are how our @injectable, @controller, @module, these are how they work under the hood. Strict null checks and complete non-implicit any give us TypeScript full power. So the path aliases that we're also going to use would make sure our import stays clean. So this is still installing, as we can see. So while that is running, okay, that is done, we can just cd into our e-commerce API. As you can see, we now have our files being tracked. So we then have to install a set of package. But before we install, or maybe in our next session, in our next video, we are going to have to delete some of these files because we have a way we want to structure this API to ensure it is easily maintainable over time. It follows clean architecture and dependency injection and inversion. So let's install our packages. So npm install at NestJS config install at NestJS JWT JS. Let's even copy this so we won't have to be typing them all the time. JWT, then at NestJS Mongoose. This is the ORM that we'll be using for our database. We'll be using MongoDB. So we also have at NestJS passports. We also have at NestJS Swagger for our Swagger documentation, which would be seen. We also have our NestJS throttler for rate limiting. We also have our NestJS, or let's install this for now. And while that is installing, let's go through the process of having our Mongo database. So you can just search Mongo online or MongoDB online. When you see it, this is it. You then have to sign up if you don't have an account, or okay, let's say get started. But I have registered, right? So let me just sign in. Let me just sign in with Google. Oh, it's not downloading. So I already have it, right? When you sign in, you create a project and you ensure you choose a free. Let's even try viewing all our projects. Let's say you're about to create a new database. You can just like create a new project. Let's say e-commerce, and let's say I click on next. Let's say I allow only the project to now, or since I might not want to create a project, let's just go to all our projects. Let's go to our project 0, and that is the default project when you create an account. Let's say I want to like I already have my cluster created. Let's say I want to connect to my database. I have all the details here. So when you create your account, right, you can find, or let's imagine that I want to just create a new cluster. I should have a free access here, right? If I had not created an initial cluster, which was cluster 0, I would see a free cluster here to create. Right? But since I already have that, I do not need to bother to create a new one. So when you create it, you can click on connect new to then get your MongoDB credentials. So let's proceed. So we have those installed. Let's proceed to installing others. Npm install. What was our last? I think we installed throttler. We need to install JS and also at NestJS, or let's say our class validator. Let's install this too. Okay, there are some issues. Oh, class validator, that was incorrect. Okay, interesting. So let's proceed to installing npm install our class transformer. These are all packages we'll be using helmets, Mongoose. I think we already have that, but it does not hurt. We have our Nest Winston. We have passports. We have passport JWT. We also have sanitize HTML. We also have Swagger UI. Swagger UI Express. We also have Winston. We also have, okay, I think let's have those for now. Okay, so and lastly, we'll be installing these packages for npm install. Then we have our NestJS. We have, I think we already have Decrypt. Oh, we need the types. Oh, we need the types now, not the NestJS. Types. Decrypt.js. We need, I think we need our types. Passport JWT. We need the types for sanitize HTML. But while installing this, we can just add the D parameter. Okay. So we then have to install our MongoDB memory saver and Supertest. npm install at we don't need to add MongoDB memory server. So these are for mocking the memory server in memory server for MongoDB. Then we have Supertests, and we have at types for Supertests for our testing. So just to provide some more context, Decrypt.js is the pure JavaScript Decrypt, no native bindings, no native issues on macOS or CI. Nest Winston replaces the built-in NestJS logger with Winston so that we get configurable log levels, which you would see. And like I said, MongoDB memory server lets us run MongoDB test without a real MongoDB connection. So lastly, we are going to be discussing, or in our next video, we are going to be discussing about the actual project structure and our environment and Swagger setup.